All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're breaking down a really interesting source article that looks at the political journey of Congressman Isidro Ungab. And, the whole piece basically paints this picture of a man with two completely different faces, especially when we're talking about the national budget. So check this out, because the source hits us with this wild contradiction from the get-go. On one side, you've got Ungab today, the critic, who is out there calling the current national budget the most corrupt. But then, if you rewind the clock, the source points to his time as chairman of the Appropriations Committee. And back then, well, he was apparently defending these super controversial budget insertions by just calling them governance. So what gives? How do you get from one to the other? To figure that out, the source takes us back to when Ungab was heading up the powerful Appropriations Committee during the Duterte administration. The article makes it pretty clear. He wasn't just some guy on the sidelines. He was a central player, basically the gatekeeper for the country's finances. Now, a big focus of the article is this thing called the Small Committee. According to the source, this was a small but very powerful group that was in charge of all these last-minute and often not-so-transparent changes to the budget. And the article alleges that not only was Ungab on this committee, but he actually went out and publicly defended it. And that leads us to another key term you need to know, errata insertions. The source describes these as these little last-minute tweaks that were quietly slipped into the budget document. And here's the kicker. It makes a very specific claim that while he was chairman, Ungab himself personally got over 100 pages of these errata from the Department of Budget and Management. And this, right here, just shows you the conflict perfectly. You had fiscal watchdogs at the time totally freaking out, calling these insertions an appalling precedent that was just wrecking transparency. But according to the source, Chairman Ungab's response, he just framed it as a totally normal part of governance. I mean, you can't get two more opposite views of the exact same thing. But the article doesn't stop there. It also claims that Ungab's committee played a big role in changing the whole definition of what savings meant in the budget. And the alleged result of that? It basically gave the executive branch under President Duterte at the time this massive power to move funds around with way less oversight. And get a load of this number, 3 billion pesos. The source zeroes in on this one moment in 2020 where Ungab supposedly boasted that he had found 3 billion pesos pretty much overnight. And this was all apparently to make room for some last-minute amendments and ram the entire budget through for approval in just a single day. Wow. So yeah, that's the picture the source paints of Ungab back then. But fast forward to now, and the article points out a complete 180. Today, Ungab has positioned himself as one of the loudest critics of the budget. He's actually on record calling the current budget process the most corrupt. Now, according to the source, that is just a stunning turnaround from the same person who used to defend the very same kinds of mechanisms he's now attacking. But then the article asks this really tough question. If this concern for how money is spent is so genuine, where was it before? It broadens its argument, pointing to what it calls Ungab's record of silence during other huge controversies. The source then just rattles off this list of high-profile issues from the last administration. It asks, where was Congressman Ungab's outrage during the 11 billion peso Farmally scandal? What about when all those reports of ghost flood control projects came out? Or the Malampay deal, all the COA flags on spending, or that constantly growing security budget for the war on drugs? And according to the article, the answer to every single one of those questions was exactly the same: silence. And the source uses this to build its case that maybe, just maybe, Ungab's criticisms are selective and timed for political reasons. So all of this leads to the article's main metaphor, what it calls the boomerang of accountability. The whole idea here is that Ungab's own words, the very standards he's now applying to other people, are coming right back around to hit him. And the source really hinges this whole argument on one specific line they say came from Ungab himself. Hindi pwedeng hindi alam ng congressman. It basically means a congressman can't just claim they didn't know. The article says he used this to hold others accountable, but now that same line is being used as a mirror to his own past. And here's how the source lays out that boomerang effect. 1, he had to have known about the small committee and its insertions because, well, he allegedly used it. 2, he had to have known about the redefined savings because his committee defended it. And 3, he had to have known about those midnight billions because, according to the article, he bragged about it. So the article lands on this really powerful, direct conclusion. It argues that Ungab doesn't really have the moral high ground to be a fiscal watchdog today. It puts it bluntly, saying that in its view, transparency is not a comeback strategy. And all this really leaves us with a much bigger question.
one that goes way beyond just this one politician. Based on the story laid out in the source material, you have to wonder, can someone who was once a key part of the system ever be a truly credible voice for changing it? It's a challenging thought to end on. Thanks for tuning in.